I've got 3 or 4 different ways of making bass line. So just a sine wave. Nothing going on there really. Bit of attack. Let's see what I've done on that actually. So that's one, just a sine wave in any synth or EXS24. This is just one note, just to accompany the call and response on the wobble. So that's just a sine wave. I'm not even doing anything exciting with that. The excitement comes on the second part, which is the wobble. And all that literally is a sine wave again. With 2 notes a semitone apart, so we're getting semi-phase cancellation. And that's it. I used that classic jungle back in the day when you bought an Akai. On the disc came a sine wave. Someone by accident did that. And then everyone rinsed the wobble bass for a few years. Problem with that is obviously you are fluctuating between pitch, but who cares? Minor, you can tweak things. So that's one. So a sine wave. I only ever use 2 different types of bass: the 808 and a sine wave. I don't trouble any other subs at all. No need. They're both pure. They're nice. They're the low end that I need. I don't go looking for subs. That's all the sub you need in your life. Just learn how to sculpt them and to treat them in a way if you're into sub bass. Obviously, if you kind of a bit more into dub and you want a bit more of a realistic vibe, you can get some real bass and process that, or you can layer it with the tones of a real bass guitar over a sub to get the best of both worlds, if you want that kind of tonality and stuff. But that's it for a sub. That's what I'm doing. And then the third way to do it, so it's the straight note sine wave. It's the 2 notes a semitone apart. And it's the one that I did in Blind Man, which is basically a glide of 186 milliseconds. I don't know why. I think it's musical. I think it kind of works without things sounding too out of key. So there's a glide on there. Don't worry about that tuning. I don't even know why I tuned that. I could have just played the note 4 semitones higher. So a glide. So now we want one voice. So we want to use the overlap of the notes to trigger the glide in a different way, right? So here it's kind of woo, kind of gliding in. That can just be one way, but I like the wobble. So what I did on a track that I made called Blind Man is I used a tremolo plugin in Logic, which is modulation, tremolo in mono, and this is cool. You can change the depth, the rate, and it's just one note, so I'm not fluctuating between 2 pitches. So that's no difference to some low frequency oscillation controlling amplitude on the synth. Okay, but that's cool. It's just a quick plug-in and it's visual. I can kind of move the offset. That's pretty cool. So I can have that. The kick drum might be, those 2 notes might hit at the same time, a kick and a bass. But if I change the offset, that kind of helps me ensure that the kick is not troubling the sub too much, you know, so I can just use some of that, and that's kind of cool. You don't have to use sidechaining, and you don't have to worry too much about your EQ. Obviously there's going to be some bleed, and you can change the speed based on divisions. And you can automate that stuff as well, so you can kind of assign it and get all crazy if you want. And you can change the shape like that. That's pretty cool. And then depth. Bit too deep on that. The glide and the wobble all contributes towards a nice movement on the sub. And that's what we're doing here. So we've got two variations of the sine wave. One is just a straight note, and one is a wobble, kind of call and response. I love a bit of call and response. So everything bouncing off of each other, creating a conversation rather than everything playing at the same time. And you'll hear that here. So we've got the drums and the bass causing or creating a call and response. And that probably came from whenever it was Digital that he was my bassline bully, and I would always try and settle on the first sub bass that I jammed out, and he was saying, nah man, let's do 5, 6 more. And I'd end up with like 5 or 6 basses that are actually all pretty cool, and sometimes I end up using 2 of them, so I amalgamate 2 into one sequence, and you know, that kind of works as well. So again, it's just not, that's another problem when we get a bit too kind of, yeah, that sounds wicked. Okay, cool, it sounds wicked, but see what's next as well. Keep going for a little bit longer because you never know what else could come. I had to learn that the hard way because I would do 1 sub and that would be it. Again, you don't want to get caught up in being there forever, but just see what's next because you never know. Cool, so there's my 2 sub bass techniques. We've got the kick there. The other option for bass I'll quickly show you is, because it's an important one for 808s and layering synths and stuff like that, is Ultra Beat has one of the best clean 808s I've heard, actually, to be honest. It's not been processed that much. So if you go into the drum kits, Boutique 808. So when you go past the drums in the kit in here, you've just got an 808 bass that's all tuned nicely. So. Right, so what I do with that is I have a version that's the main root sub. Now this technique here is something that when you're working with synths and you want highs, mids, growls, rumbles and lows at the same time, this is something that can help you get the best of all of that instead of having one sound doing the whole thing. So first thing I'll do is take off any sends, take the click out, don't really want that. That's going to be my sub. I'm going to let that be a sub. I don't need that to be anything else. I'll duplicate again. Version 2, version 3, duplicate again, version 4. That one will be the sub. This one, we're going to put some of the highs back in. We're going to take the lows out. We're going to keep our channel EQ at the end of the chain, and we're going to start to sound designing with some distortion. Preset in here that I love to start off with this sort of stuff is the Anvil Shred, and work back from that. That for the mids. Third one, we're going to have it as some of the higher energy, so some of the sizzle, more distortion though. Take this one off. Just distortion, overdrive, just smash it. Just mute, see what we're doing. To bring some of the frequencies back in. add some different type of distortion. So. They're all doing something. That was a bit clicky. They can add like a knock. Without it, you haven't got that attack. In fact, let's just add the overdrive on here. Now this principle, regardless what you're doing synthesis, if you want a big growling sub that's got the mids and the highs and the low mids, and you want to have an independent sub, this is the best way to do it, because you're always going to maintain that level there. And that's the weight. Then you could bring in the other parts. And if I want more sub, I turn the sub up. I'm not then battling with an EQ to try and get 5 or 6 different outcomes from one sound. You're creating layers. So that can, any synthesis technique, if you found a really cool sound in a synth and it's got all the frequencies you want, you can take it down to its fundamentals. So if the sound does already have the growls and stuff in it, and you want to take it down to the lows, just take it all down to the lows and just make a sub from that sound. And then that way, any kind of modulation you've got with it will move at the same time as the other layers, because sometimes you might have this crazy synth that's dancing around, and by just layering it with a sine wave or whatever might not work. So if you take it down to a sub level and create a sub from it, and then have the other versions on top by taking out the frequencies of the lows, you'll have the best of all those different worlds basically.